6 years ago, the Lawson mansion was a tomb of polished marble and suffocating silence. Jane stood before Ken, her hands clenched, the last vestiges of hope a dying ember in her chest. 7 years of marriage had been whittled down to this single, sterile moment in his study. "I loved you, Ken," she whispered, the words tasting like ash, "from the moment we met. All this time, I thought he didn't even look up from the document he was signing, his pen scratching across the paper with finality. Love was never a clause in our contract, Jane. It was a merger of assets, not hearts. You were a suitable wife. Nothing more." He finally met her gaze, his eyes as cold and grey as a Calgary winter sky. "Peggy is who I want. She always has been." The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Just then, Peggy sashayed into the room, a triumphant smirk playing on her perfectly painted lips. She circled Jane like a predator, her gaze sweeping over Jane's simple dress and worn expression with undisguised contempt. "Look at you," Peggy cooed, her voice dripping with venom, "still playing the part of the dutiful wife. A little wretch trying to fit into a world you were never meant for." Something inside Jane snapped. The humiliation, the years of quiet desperation, the cold rejection, it all coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. The love she'd clung to was an illusion. This life was a cage. She looked from Ken's indifferent face to Peggy's smug one and felt not heartbreak, but a surge of pure, unadulterated resolve. She would not be their victim. She would break free. 6 years later, the world was a different place. Dr. Jennifer Jones stood bathed in the cool, blue-white light of her genetics lab. Here, she was not a discarded wife but a leader, a pioneer. The air hummed with the quiet power of servers and sequencers. She commanded this world of data and discovery with an easy confidence she had never known in the Lawson mansion. Suddenly, the hum escalated to a frantic shriek. Red lights flashed across the clean room, casting demonic shadows on the chrome equipment. A skull and crossbones icon blinked mockingly on her main monitor. Jane sighed, a small smile touching her lips. She didn't bother with the emergency protocols. Instead, she turned toward a small alcove hidden behind a server rack. "No, system-wide lockdown is overkill. Even for you." A small boy with Ken's sharp eyes and her determined chin peeked out, a tablet clutched in his hands. "Sorry, Mum," he said, not looking sorry at all. The sub-particle diffusion simulation was boring. Jane knelt, her lab coat pulling around her on the sterile floor. She gently took the tablet from him. "I've told you, my lab's firewall isn't your personal playground." His face fell, the mischief replaced by a genuine pang of guilt. "I just wanted to see you. You're always working." Her heart clenched. She smoothed his dark hair, her expression softening. "I know, sweetie. I'm sorry." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the ghost of another face superimposed over his. For a fleeting moment, the grief was a physical ache in her chest. Noah was a miracle, but he was supposed to have been one of two. His twin sister, lost to a congenital defect moments after birth, was a wound that had never fully healed. She often wondered if her daughter would have had Noah's spark, his brilliant, reckless curiosity. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the memory. It was her boss, Miss Ives. "Jennifer." The voice was urgent. "Pack your bags." "And Noah's. The Calgary project just got fast-tracked. The university needs our top mind on site. You leave tonight." Calgary. The name alone sent a chill down her spine. Meanwhile, in a sprawling corner office overlooking the very city she was flying toward, Ken Lawson slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. 6 years. 6 years and you found nothing." His assistant flinched. "Sir." She vanished. No credit cards, no social security activity, no digital footprint. It's like she ceased to exist. Ken's jaw was a tight line of frustration. He had spent a fortune, hired the best investigators, all to find the woman who had walked out of his life without a trace. He told himself it was about the divorce settlement, about loose ends. But deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge, it was a infuriating void. "I want her found," he commanded, his voice dangerously low. "I don't care what it costs. Find Jane. You have 6 hours." He was unaware that the woman he was hunting had just touched down at Calgary International Airport. The hotel suite May's eyes had booked was opulent, a painful reminder of the life Jane had escaped. Gold fixtures gleamed, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city that held her darkest memories. Noah, oblivious, was already testing the acoustics in the marble bathroom. The door burst open and Miss Ives rushed in, her face pale with panic. "We have to go now." "What? We just got here," Jane said, confused. "He bought the hotel," Miss Ives said, her words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "Ken Lawson. He just closed the deal on the entire international chain. His security team is doing a sweep of the VIP floors as we speak. We can't be here when he arrives." A cold dread washed over Jane. The air in the kindergarten buzzed with the frantic energy of pick-up time, a cacophony of squealing children and parental chatter. But in the corner, her pocket of tense silence had formed around a small, crying boy. His mother clutched him protectively, glaring at 7-year-old Noah, who stood ramrod straight, his small fists clenched at his sides. He pushed Leo, the woman accused, a voice sharp enough to cut through the din. Noah's face was a mask of furious indignation. "I did not." He took Olivia's toy. It was hers. He jutted his chin toward a little girl standing just behind him. She was a fragile whisper of a child, her dark hair falling like a silken curtain around a pale, heart-shaped face. Her enormous brown eyes were wired with a silent, consuming fear as she stared at the floor, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Noah, what's going on?" The voice was calm, a cool stream of water on a fire, but it held an undercurrent of steel. "Dr. Jennifer Jones, known to everyone here simply as Jane, knelt beside her son, her professional composure warring with a mother's instinct to shield him from the world. "He's a bully. That's what's going on," the other mother snapped. Jane ignored her, her gaze fixed on Noah. "Tell me." Leo snatched Olivia's bunny. Noah insisted, his voice trembling with a child's righteous fury. "She was sad, so I got it back for her. That's all." Jane's eyes drifted from her son to the silent girl. And then, the world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was a ghost from a past she had buried under 7 years of grief and resolve. The delicate curve of the girl's jaw, the exact shade of her doe-like eyes, the tiny, almost imperceptible crescent-shaped birthmark peeking out from behind her right ear. It was a mark Jane had traced with her own finger in a hospital room, a lifetime ago. A raw, physical ache bloomed in her chest, a phantom pain for a loss she had never truly accepted. "It can't be," she thought, the words a frantic, desperate prayer. "It's impossible." Just then, a man in a crisp suit entered the room. "I'm here for Olivia Lawson." The name was a thunderclap, confirming her worst fear. Lawson. Ken's name. A cold dread washed over Jane, and her protective instinct slammed into overdrive. Through the wide glass doors of the kindergarten, she saw the gleaming black hood of a familiar Bentley, and behind the wheel, the unmistakable silhouette of Kenneth Lawson. He was here. Panic, sharp and absolute, seized her. She couldn't let in see Noah. Not now. Not like this. "We're leaving," she said, her voice tight. She grabbed Noah's hand, her grip bordering on painful. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding," she murmured to the teacher, pulling her son toward the side exit, away from the main entrance, away from Ken. She didn't look back, but she could feel the little girl's eyes on her, a silent, searching gaze that pierced her to the soul. From his car, Ken watched the security feed from the hotel conference on his tablet, his jaw tight. A ghost had walked past his meeting room, an Argyle woman with familiar, intelligent eyes and a determined stride. Jennifer Jones. He'd sent his assistant to investigate, but she had vanished. Now, his assistant's text confirmed she had just been at Olivia's kindergarten. "She's playing games," he muttered, the engine's low rumble a counterpoint to his own frustration. "She won't fool me again." He was a man who controlled empires. He would not be outmaneuvered by the woman who had shattered his world and disappeared with his son. Back in the classroom, as the assistant gently helped Olivia with her coat, the little girl's gaze remained fixed on the door through which Jane and Noah had vanished. The room had returned to its usual chaos, but for Olivia, it was silent. Then, a sound emerged from her lips, soft but stunningly clear, a word no one had ever heard her speak. "Olivia." The assistant froze. The teacher stopped mid-sentence. For a moment, the world held its breath. It was her own name, a declaration of self, uttered for the first time in the wake of the woman who looked just like her. Later that day, the sterile opulence of Ken's mansion felt like a cage. Peggy, Ken's fiancée, stood over Olivia, her perfectly manicured hands on her hips, her smile a brittle slash of red. "What is this?" she demanded, dangling Olivia's smartwatch by its strap. "Your teacher called, said you had a breakthrough. Are you finally going to stop this ridiculous silent act?" Olivia shrank back, her eyes wide with terror. She reached for the watch, a gift from Ken that tracked her vitals and allowed him to speak to her even when she wouldn't speak back. Peggy snatched it away. "Don't you dare ignore me, you disobedient little brat." In a flash of vindictive rage, she turned and threw the smartwatch into the towering, custom-built fish tank. It hit the water with a soft flop and sank among the exotic fish, its screen flickering for a moment before dying. When Ken walked in, he found Peggy dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and Olivia trembling in the corner. "Ken, thank God," Peggy cried, rushing to him. She had a terrible tantrum. She was screaming and she hit me. Then she threw her watch into the fish tank. "I don't know what to do with her." Ken looked from Peggy's theatrical distress to Olivia's stark, silent fear. He knelt before his daughter. "Olivia," he said, his voice firm but not unkind, "we don't hit people. And we don't throw things. You know that." But as he spoke, he saw it. There was no defiance in Olivia's eyes, only a profound, bottomless terror. He knew Peggy's penchant for drama, and a flicker of doubt, small but persistent, ignited within him. Something wasn't right. "She needs professional help." "Ken," Peggy pressed, her voice laced with bitter resentment. "She's not normal. She is a child who has been through trauma," Ken said, his voice dropping, a dangerous edge creeping in. "She needs patience, not judgment." Peggy's composure finally snapped. "She's not even yours, Ken. She's adopted. A defective little thing you picked up out of guilt. How are we supposed to plan a wedding, to have our own family, when you spend every waking moment coddling her?" Ken rose to his full height, his expression turning to ice. The doubtful father was gone, replaced by the ruthless CEO. "She is my daughter," he said, each word a block of granite. "The only one I have. Anyone who causes her a problem can leave this house." Immediately, the threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. Peggy's face paled, her fabricated tears drying instantly. She backed down, her eyes glittering with a venomous promise of future battles. Ken turned his back on her, his gaze falling on Olivia, his heart racked with a sudden, chilling premonition that the carefully constructed piece of his life was about to be shattered completely. The sharp, insistent ring of the doorbell sliced through the quiet evening air of Jane's small apartment. Her heart seized. It was too late for a casual visitor. Through the peephole, Her blood ran cold. Ken Lawson stood on her doorstep. His sharp suit and imposing frame a stark reminder of a life she had fought to escape. Beside him, holding his hand, was Olivia. And rushing to open the door from the inside was Noah. No. Noah. Wait, Jane whispered frantically. But it was too late. Her son, a miniature version of the man in the hallway, swung the door open with a proud grin. Dad, look. I told you she was the best, Olivia chirped, pointing at Jane. Ken's eyes, the same shade of slate grey she remembered with an ache, flickered from Olivia to Noah, then locked onto Jane. The air crackled with 7 years of unspoken words of pain and questions. Jane instinctively moved to block the doorway, a human shield between her past and her present. Ken, she said, her voice tight but even. What a surprise. Olivia is a delight. I'll just get her coat. But Ken's gaze was fixed on Noah, who stared back with unabashed curiosity. An unsettling stillness settled over Ken as he studied the boy's features, the stubborn set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. It was like looking at a faded photograph of himself as a child. A disquieting thought, one he dismissed as impossible, began to claw its way into his mind. Can we come in for a moment? Ken asked, his voice low, his question feeling more like a command. Defeated, Jane stepped aside. The tension in her tiny living room was suffocating. She insisted they stay for the simple dinner she'd prepared, a desperate attempt to control the narrative, to keep the interaction superficial. But as they sat around her small table, she watched Ken's eyes continually drift to Noah. He saw how the boy held his fork, the focused way he explained the mechanics of his latest robotics project. Every gesture was a tiny, excruciating echo of the man across from him. Jane's breath caught in her throat. He knows. He has to know. Later, while clearing the plates, a shard of a chipped dish sliced Jane's palm. She winced, a hiss of pain escaping her lips. Before she could react, Ken was at her side, gently taking her hand and guiding her to the sink. He ran cool water over the cut, his touch sending a jolt through her that was entirely unwelcome and utterly familiar. He worked with a quiet focus, dabbing the cut dry and wrapping a bandage around her palm. His fingers brushed against hers, a whisper of their shared history. For a fleeting second, Jane forgot the years of hurt, the betrayal, the lies. She saw only the man who had once promised her forever, and a faint blush crept up her neck. As Ken finished, his thumb lingering on her wrist, Jane's eyes fell on Olivia, who was showing Noah a drawing. The sleeve of the little girl's sweater had ridden up, revealing a constellation of bruises on her small arms, some faded and yellow, others a raw, angry purple. A cold fury, sharp and maternal, surged through Jane. This wasn't a one-time accident. This was a pattern. This was abuse. Her protective instincts, already on high alert, sharpened into a deadly point aimed at an unknown enemy. That enemy was revealed later that night in the cold marble expanse of Ken's mansion. Peggy, her face a mask of rage after hearing Olivia bubble with stories of Auntie Jane and Noah, cornered the child in the hallway. You will not see them again. Do you understand? Peggy's voice was a venomous hiss. You belong to me. You will listen to me. When Olivia simply stared back with wide, frightened eyes, Peggy's control snapped. She raised her hand and struck the child across the face, the sound a sickening crack in the silent house. I said, do you understand me? I understand perfectly. Ken's voice, deadly calm, came from the top of the stairs. He had seen everything. Peggy whirled around, her expression shifting from fury to panicked disbelief. But before she could spin a lie, a small, trembling voice broke the silence, a voice that had been largely muted for months. She hits me, Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face as she pointed a small finger at Peggy. Daddy, It was Peggy. She's the one who always hits me. The dam of silence broke. Olivia's confession, raw and irrefutable, stripped Peggy of every defense. For Ken, it was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the monster he had nearly married. The next day, the battlefield shifted to the glittering ballroom of the Glint Hotel, where Calgary's top medical minds had gathered for a prestigious conference. Jane, presenting as the formidable Dr. Jennifer Jones, moved through the crowd with an air of quiet confidence. She was in her element, a world away from the domestic turmoil. She was unaware that Ken, having heard whispers of a brilliant new doctor revolutionizing her field, was also in attendance, watching from the back. The attack came without warning. Freya, Ken's cousin and Peggy's loyal co-conspirator, took the microphone. While we appreciate Dr. Jones's modern approach, she began, her voice dripping with condescension. Some conditions require true expertise. For my grandfather, Mr. Quinn, we have brought in a true master of traditional medicine, Mr. Duggan. A pompous-looking man stepped forward as Freya and the visibly desperate Peggy smirked at Jane. They intended to publicly humiliate her by curing the family patriarch, where she had supposedly failed. Mr. Duggan approached the elderly Mr. Quinn, who was seated in a wheelchair on the stage, and prepared a pungent herbal concoction. Jane's eyes narrowed. She recognized the herbs. For a healthy person, they were benign, but for someone with Mr. Quinn's specific heart condition, a detail she'd noted in his file, the mixture was a potent poison. It would trigger a catastrophic cardiac event. Stop! Jane's voice cut through the room, sharp and authoritative. Jealous, Dr. Jones, Freya sneered. Afraid a real master will expose you as the quack you are. That mixture will stop his heart, Jane stated, ignoring the insults and striding toward the stage. His body can't process it. Peggy stepped in front of her. Ken's family doesn't need the help of a charlatan. But it was too late. Mr. Duggan, eager to prove his worth, had already administered a spoonful to the old man. Mr. Quinn gasped, his face turning ashen as his body went rigid. Panic erupted. Jane pushed past them. Someone call for a defibrillator, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Without hesitation, she pulled a case of acupuncture needles from her bag. As Freya and Peggy screamed accusations, Jane's hands moved with breathtaking speed and precision, inserting needles into key pressure points on Mr. Quinn's head and chest. The crowd watched, mesmerized, as the old man's violent tremors subsided. His breathing, ragged and shallow, began to even out. Within a minute, his eyes fluttered open. Stunned silence fell over the ballroom. Seizing the moment, Peggy rushed to Ken's side, grabbing his arm. Ken, darling, thank goodness you're here, she declared loudly. Tell this woman to leave my future grandfather-in-law alone. As your wife, I demand it. Ken pulled his arm away, his expression one of pure disgust. His voice was low but carried to every corner of the silent room. You are not my wife. Peggy, we are not getting married. As of this moment, we are finished. The collective gasp was audible as Peggy stood frozen in public disgrace. Another miracle was happening on stage. Under Jane's continued, careful treatment, Mr. Quinn slowly, miraculously, pushed himself to his feet. He stood, shaky but upright, for the first time in 5 years. The ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. The victory was absolute. Freya and Peggy, cornered and utterly defeated, were forced by furious Mr. Quinn to walk onto the stage and offer Jane a public, humiliating apology. Jane accepted it with quiet dignity, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before finally landing on Ken, whose eyes held a new, complicated mixture of awe, regret, and dawning understanding. The frantic call came just after 9, shattering the fragile peace of Jane's apartment. Ken's voice, usually a fortress of calm authority, was strained, stripped bare by a father's panic. She won't stop crying. The fever's climbing, and she won't let anyone near her. Jane, please. Jane's first instinct was a cold, hard no. Why should she soothe the child of the man who had shattered her world? But then a pained, high-pitched wail echoed through the phone, a sound that bypassed her anger and struck a chord deep within her. It was the universal sound of a child suffering. "I'll be there," she said, her voice clipped. For Olivia's sake. Walking into the opulent, sterile silence of Ken's mansion felt like stepping back into a nightmare. In the master suite, the scene was one of controlled chaos. A visibly frayed Ken was trying to reason with a small, thrashing figure in the center of the enormous bed. Her face flushed and tear-streaked. A nanny hovered uselessly nearby, a spoon of medicine held like a rejected peace offering. "Olivia, honey, you have to take this," Ken pleaded, his voice losing its edge of command. Jane didn't say a word. She moved past him, her presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her movements slow and deliberate. She dipped a cloth in a bowl of cool water, wrung it out, and gently laid it on Olivia's forehead. The little girl's cries quieted to whimpers, her wide, fever-bright eyes fixing on Jane's face. "Hello, sweet girl," Jane murmured, her voice a low, calming hum. "That feels a little better, doesn't it?" She picked up the spoon. "This will help the fire in your tummy go away. Just one quick taste." To Ken's astonishment, Olivia whimpered once more, then obediently opened her mouth. She swallowed the medicine without a fight, her small body finally relaxing into the mattress. Within minutes, her breathing evened out, her eyelids fluttering as sleep began to claim her. Jane continued to stroke her hair, a powerful, instinctual ache blooming in her chest. Ken watched from the doorway, a knot of confusion, a knot tightening in his throat. He had never seen Olivia respond to anyone like that. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. The air in Jane's small apartment was a fragile membrane, stretched taut with the unspoken. Ken stood frozen in the doorway, a ghost of his own making, the residual venom of Peggy's parting shriek still echoing in the hallway. But inside, there was only a tense, vibrating silence. It was centered on the woman he'd wronged and the two children who were the axes on which their world had just tilted. Olivia, her face buried in the crook of Jane's neck, had her small arms locked in a grip of absolute belonging. Her refusal to go with Peggy, her shrill, heartbroken cry of "I want my mommy," had been the first crack in Ken's carefully constructed reality. Jane sat on the edge of her worn sofa, one hand stroking Olivia's hair, her posture a fortress of maternal calm. She didn't look at Ken, her entire being focused on the trembling child in her arms. Beside them, Noah stood guard. He looked impossibly small and yet fiercely protective, his gaze fixed on Ken with an unnerving maturity. He tugged lightly on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, his voice clear in the quiet room. Is SN Daddy mad at Olivia?" Jane's hand stilled. She finally lifted her eyes to Ken, a flicker of exhaustion in their depths. "SM Daddy." Noah nodded, his brow furrowed with concern. "Scary mean Daddy," he clarified, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He shot a wary glance at Ken. "I know she's his daughter. I saw his picture on her tablet. But when those kids were being mean to her at the park, I didn't care. She's my sister." He said the word with the simple, uncheckable conviction of childhood truth. "I had to help." The words, so innocent and yet so profound, landed like stones in the silence. Ken felt the air leave his lungs. Scary mean Daddy. The label was a knife to the gut, a child's honest reflection of the man he'd become. But it was the other word that shattered him. Sister. His gaze shifted from Noah to Olivia, and for the first time, he truly saw. It wasn't just a passing resemblance. a trick of the light he'd dismissed a dozen times. It was in the identical curve of their eyebrows, the determined set of their small jaws. It was in the unique hazel flecks in Noah's eyes, a perfect mirror of the ones he'd just seen in Olivia's tear-filled gaze. It was in the faint dimple that appeared on Noah's left cheek when he worried his lip, the same dimple that had always charmed him on Olivia. A cold dread, mingled with a wild, impossible hope, clawed its way up his throat. He saw Jane from 7 years ago, her face pale and drawn in a hospital bed. He heard the doctor's detached, clinical words. A boy and a girl, but I'm sorry, the girl didn't make it. He remembered the suffocating grief, the anger he'd misdirected entirely at her, blaming her for a loss that had hollowed them both out. He remembered the adoption agency calling a month later, a miracle baby, a little girl abandoned at that very same hospital on that very same day. A balm for his broken heart, a replacement. The pieces didn't just click into place. They slammed together with the force of a tectonic shift, ripping apart the foundations of his life. He took a stumbling step into the room, his corporate armor dissolving into nothing. His voice was a raw, broken thing. Jane, what is he saying? Who is he? Jane watched the dawning horror and understanding warring in his eyes. The fight was over. There was nothing left to hide. No strength left to pretend. Her own voice was quiet, worn thin by years of solitary grief and struggle, but it held the unshakable weight of truth. His name is Noah, she said, her gaze holding his. He's 7 years old. He's brilliant, and he's brave, and he has your eyes. Ken's breath hitched. No, it's not possible. They told me she'd die, Jane continued, her voice gaining a sliver of its old fire, the echo of a mother's rage. The hospital, your father's fixer. They handed me my son and told me my daughter was gone. They paid a nurse to lie, to forge a death certificate. They gave you our daughter and told you she was an orphan. She finally stood, shifting Olivia gently to her hip. The 2 children, one in her arms, one at her side, framed her like a living testament to her words. They're twins, Ken, she said, the words falling between them, heavy and final. Olivia and Noah, they are our children. The confession detonated the last vestiges of Ken's denial. The world tilted, colors blurring at the edges of his vision. Our children. A son. He had a son. A son he had threatened, belittled, and treated as an obstacle. A son who had, in a moment of pure instinct, protected a sister he didn't even know he had. A guttural sound of anguish tore from his chest. It was the sound of 7 years of misplaced anger, of profound loss, of soul-deep regret. He didn't walk. He fell. He landed on his knees before her, the expensive fabric of his suit pulling on the scuffed hardwood floor of her simple apartment. He wasn't a CEO. He wasn't Mr. Lawson. He was just a man undone by the truth. Jane. He choked out, his head bowed. I'm sorry. God, I am so sorry. The words were inadequate, flimsy nets trying to capture an ocean of failure. He looked up, his face a mess of tears, his composure utterly shattered. For everything, for not believing you, for not protecting you, for him. His gaze found Noah, and his heart broke all over again. He saw the fear and confusion in his son's eyes. Reaching out a trembling hand, he whispered, Noah. Noah looked to his mother, who gave him the slightest, most reassuring of nods. Hesitantly, the boy stepped forward. Ken's hand gently cupped his cheek, his thumb tracing the line of his jaw. It was real. This was his son. With a choked sob, he pulled Noah into his arms, burying his face in the boy's hair, inhaling the simple, clean scent of his child. Olivia, seeing her father's tears, wriggled out of Jane's arms and toddled over, her small hand patting Ken's shaking back. It's okay, Daddy, she murmured. Don't be scary, mean sad. Ken's ragged laugh was half a sob. He opened his other arm, and Olivia climbed into the embrace, fitting perfectly against him. He was now kneeling on the floor, clutching the tehaz of his heart. The children he never knew he had together. He looked up at Jane, his eyes pleading, asking a question for which he deserved no positive answer. Jane knelt in front of him, her own tears finally falling freely. Not in sorrow, but in overwhelming relief. She placed her hands over his, her touch a balm on his fractured soul. She didn't need to say a word. Her forgiveness was in the gentle pressure of her fingers, in the softening of her gaze. He reached for her, and she leaned into the embrace, completing the circle. The four of them were a tangle of arms and legs on the floor of the tiny apartment, a messy, imperfect, and utterly whole family. The silence that fell was no longer fragile or tense. It was a profound peace, the quiet hum of souls slotting back into their rightful place. The light from the single window cast a warm glow over them, illuminating not of a painful story, but the very first, breathtaking page of a new one.